Welcome to the Simply Vegan podcast, brought to you by the team at Vegan Food and Living, the UK's best-selling vegan magazine. I'm Holly Johnson, and each Tuesday I get together with my colleague Molly Pickering to share what we've been eating, what's got us thinking, and the new products that are worth trying. And don't miss our Thursday podcast, where we chat to some of the leading names in veganism.
If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, we'd love it if you hit the subscribe button, as it helps us to rate in the charts. It also means you'll be alerted to every new episode of your favourite podcast.
If you're anything like me, life can quickly become chaotic, and finding fresh and nutritional vegan recipes can become another thing to add to the to-do list. Our best-selling magazine, Vegan Food and Living, is on hand to help. You can join us today and try an issue for just 99p by visiting veganfoodandliving.com/podcast or using code podcast when you order with us. You'll not only receive the magazine to your door, but also have access to thousands of plant-based recipes at your fingertips in our digital magazine archive, which is fully searchable and simple to use. Join us today and make cooking delicious vegan food that bit more exciting by visiting veganfoodandliving.com/podcast. For today's episode, I'm joined by Louise Palmer Masterton, who is founder of the restaurant chain Stem and Glory. Hi, Louise, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thanks, Holly.
So do you want to start by sort of telling everyone a bit about yourself and what led you to go vegan?
Okay, it's a long time ago now. I guess I'm one of those people. I mean, I think it goes two ways with turning vegan. It's either an instant moment or it's a long and gradual process. But with me, it was in an instant. I was a teenager, and a friend of mine at the time introduced me to the idea of compassionate eating. And I kind of never really thought about it before. And as soon as I thought about it, that was it. Bang. Changed forever. So I gave up eating meat on the spot when I was late teens, and I never looked back. That was a long time ago now.
Yeah. So would you class yourself as sort of one of those old school vegans before it became trendy?
Yeah, the word old is very appropriate in my case. Well, yeah. I mean, to be fair, that at that time, my friend who introduced me to compassionate eating, he was part of the Krishna movement, actually, and the whole kind of vegetarian, as it was seen around that time, was very much, it was kind of hippie scene, but it's always been there. It's always been there, and the vegan scene's always been there as well. But obviously, it's grown a lot now. It's much, much bigger.
Yeah, you must have seen some crazy big changes over the last however many years. I'm sort of 4 years in, so I joined a bit late to the party, but I'm trying to make up for it now.
Well, it's never too late to join join the party.
Yeah. So what led you to found Stem and Glory then? I've been looking at the menu today, and I must admit it's making me very hungry. The food looks amazing.
Yeah, from when I always enjoyed cooking, actually, even when I was quite young. But obviously, being a vegan many, many years ago, obviously you kind of needed to cook because there was nothing. You wouldn't eat very well if you were out in restaurants at that time. So I guess it all started from a love of cooking, and I've also travelled. I've been fortunate enough to spend quite a significant time in Asia, for example, and I've just loved the kind of global cuisines. We're lucky. There's so much. Even from a vegan perspective, there's so much inspiration in places like Asia, and so I just kind of accumulated this fascination really for cooking plant-based foods. And I guess in terms of restaurants, I've always tried to find vegan food in restaurants, obviously, with varying degrees of success. And although it is even easier now, it's still not that easy to find decent vegan food, actually. So I guess Stem and Glory was the ultimate culmination of that very long-term search for a decent vegan restaurant.
Yeah. There's a lot of sort of plant-based burgers and chips going on in the pubs at the moment, isn't there? It's like, not another burger.
Yeah, obviously they have their place, particularly in converting people towards plant-based food. But yeah, that's not what we're about at Stem and Glory. We're about that kind of delicious, on the healthier end of the spectrum, but still delicious.
Yeah, I think one of the items was Korean fish tacos.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's actually my favourite dish on our menu at the moment. It's a flavour bomb. If you get a chance to try it, definitely go for it.
Yeah, well, we must come to London and visit one of the restaurants. So I thought today we'd have a bit of a fun Q&A and sort of go back to basics for anyone sort of new to veganism or what, we all get asked these questions, don't we, when we turn vegan? We get them thrown at us, and sometimes you start to question yourself because you think, well, I don't know the answer, and maybe they're right. So I thought we'd go over like the meat eaters' most asked questions. Are you up for it?
Sure. Yeah, why not?
So, number 1, humans are meant to eat meat.
Yeah, no, you need to reframe that question really. Humans don't need to eat meat. It's my view that if you don't need to eat meat, why would you eat meat? We don't have to eat meat. We're not made to eat meat. We can eat meat. We're omnivorous, which means we can eat anything. But we're definitely not carnivores, and we do not need to eat meat. Therefore, we shouldn't eat meat, in my view.
Yeah, especially in this day and age where, it's just not necessary, is it?
Well, exactly. But that's my main point with that. And I think coming back to compassionate eating, it's like if you have a choice between eating by killing something and eating by not, why wouldn't you take that compassionate choice? It makes absolute perfect sense to me on every single level.
Yeah, definitely. Number 2, what's wrong with drinking cow's milk? Cows need to be milked.
Oof, there's a big subject there. Cows do not need to be milked other than their own offspring. That's the only time. I mean, the dairy industry, obviously it's life and death, isn't it, whether you eat flesh, but the dairy industry is so problematic on so many levels, and the lives that those cows lead are just awful. There's nothing natural about the process of the milk that you receive in the supermarket. It's so far removed from the actual milk that comes from a cow for its offspring. It's just the whole thing. And it's true with meat as well. It's the market that's driven this way, and price and all of that, and availability, and consumption is out of control, really. Cows do not need to be milked, first of all. Nothing will happen to a cow if you stop milking it. It's like with humans, you feed your baby stops feeding from you, your milk dries up eventually. It's just a natural part of the thing, but if I think about those cows and what's done to them, artificially impregnated, their calves are taken away from them. It's just awful. I would urge you, if you're still asking that question, that you actually delve into what actually goes on in the milk industry.
Yeah, I think there's a new film coming out, isn't there? Is it a New Zealand-based one called Milked? Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't. There's some around at the moment, though. I think definitely it's been in the news. I've seen some posts on social media as well.
Yeah. Okay. The classic. Where do you get your protein from, and what about iron?
That's my favourite one. Now, I've written many articles on that, the protein myths. So yeah. The thing is, I'll try and summarise because it is quite a big subject. And we're a meat and 2 veg. You're younger than me, obviously, but my parents' generation, that was the diet in the UK. So you're used to having this lump of protein on a plate and then the veg around. But you see, the reality is that if you eat meat or dairy, you're getting what's called a complete protein. It contains all of the essential amino acids. But what's not widely understood is that you don't have to eat complete protein from one source. It doesn't have to be a bit of meat on a plate, for example. And as long as you combine your protein sources well, you will get all of the full spectrum of amino acids from vegetable sources. For example, wholemeal flour is quite high in protein. I think this is a little known fact.
I didn't know that.
Tofu, half a cup of tofu, there's as much protein as there is in a pork chop. Peanut butter sandwich is a complete protein because you're combining the proteins that are in the bread with the proteins that are in the nuts. Hummus is also a complete protein because it's tahini and chickpeas. So there are some things like that which are, they're in a pot and they're a complete protein. But, if you're eating vegetables, by the way, which all have a protein content too, vegetables, nuts, beans, legumes, seeds, in variable quantities, you will be receiving enough protein and the full spectrum of amino acids. There's just no doubt about it. And I think the most interesting point to make, if someone ever asks you this question, is that actually, in reality, you don't see protein deficient people in affluent populations. They just don't exist because protein deficiency is seen where there's food scarcity, basically. And that's because there's not enough food, not because there's not enough protein. So I think the protein question just needs to disappear completely. Definitely. Now, iron's interesting because my view is that iron deficiency is seen a lot in modern times due to the stressful lives that we lead. So my views changed a little bit over the years. When I was younger, I never took any kind of supplements at all. But I do think that as you get older, you're probably sensible to take some sort of iron multivitamin supplement just to be sure, because we're not leading particularly restful lives. And iron is one of those things that if you do get depleted in iron, it has quite serious effects on your health. So, but again, you don't, if you want to get iron from broccoli has a lot of iron in, for example, green vegetables are very high and rich in iron.
Yeah. Nice, healthy eating is the way forward, isn't it?
Definitely.
What about this one that seems to have surfaced a lot on social media lately? Plants have feelings too.
Yeah. But funny enough, I've heard that right since the early days too.
Have you?
So, well, I mean, there is a certain school of thought that will agree with that from a religious and philosophical perspective too. And I do believe that within the Christian movement, there's a little bit of a thing for chanting as you harvest your plants in order that they effectively die on a high note,
Right.
So, I mean, yes, you've got to think about treading lightly. It's that Thich Nhat Hanh thing about treading lightly on the earth. Of everything you do, you should sort of do in a mindful way, and that includes cultivating, growing, picking vegetables. You don't go and wreak havoc in the veg patch. You take care with what you're doing. You think about it, and if you think about a vegetable, you could create life from that as well, because tomato, for example. And I saw this the other day and I was like, this is so good. You have your tomato, you slice your tomato, and then you plant a tomato slice. One little slice of the tomato, you plant it, and then you just grow more tomatoes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So, but what are we doing? Going to the shop and buying seeds to grow tomatoes. And you have a tomato and just eat some of it and then plant some of it, and then you just grow more tomatoes. So that's a kind of cycle of life, isn't it? That everything you do, you should be thinking about preserving life and continuation and so on.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I'm going to do that. I could do that in some of my pots in the garden. I think one quote is that cows scream louder than carrots, isn't it? So, it's definitely prefer to be eating plants than a living animal. What about vegan food is processed crap?
Well, some vegan food is processed crap. However, I've actually been on a panel not so long ago, and we were talking about exactly this thing. And actually, even though a processed vegan burger is still processed and on the spectrum of healthy, the other food that we alluded to earlier in the conversation is on the other end, but a processed vegan burger is still healthier than a meat burger. So it's processed vegan food is not as healthy as unprocessed vegan food, but processed vegan food is still healthier than eating meat. That's the actual answer.
Yeah, brilliant answer. Why do you want to eat things that look like meat if you're vegan?
Well, personally, I don't, and a lot of vegans don't. But, people are doing this for different reasons. Now, if you're like me and you're doing it for the animals, then you probably don't really want anything reminiscent of something from an animal. But a great many people are doing it rightly for environmental, sustainable reasons and possibly health as well. And I think for those people, having really good plant-based substitutes is massively helpful towards converting those people to more sustainable lifestyles.
Yeah, it's kind of just the recognizable format, isn't it? The burger, the sausage.
Yeah.
I mean, you can get everything now. My daughter had vegan salmon the other day, which was just incredible. Very lifelike, and it's just sort of nice knowing that it's not harmed anything.
Yeah.
Okay, number 7. If we stopped eating animals, there would be no more sheep and cows in our countryside.
Well, okay, so first of all, ruminants are very much part of the ecosystem just generally animals, and we're not talking about farmed animals, but just ruminants. They just wander about the land, and they're very much part of the fertility of the soil and the whole process, really. And when it comes to regenerative farming, there are actually some farmers who are bringing back these kind of practices now, where you're not breeding animals to feed, but the animals just sort of live on the land, and they're part of that whole kind of process. So, I mean, obviously things would change if we didn't farm in the same way that we are now. But, not all intense farming, that's not those sheep that you see wandering in the Lake District. They're not really the biggest part of the problem when it comes to animal agriculture. So I do think there's a big conversation going on around regenerative farming. It's said to have excited farming world like nothing in recent history. So I hope that we are already sort of moving in that direction, where it will become more normal just to see ruminant animals wandering around part of the cycle of crops within an agricultural farm.
I think it's 70% of meat comes from factory farms in the UK.
Yeah.
I've read recently, which is a massive amount. I know, a lot of people sort of think, I don't buy that sort of meat. But actually, if you're grabbing a quick, ham sandwich from Boots or Tesco or wherever, that's going to be from a factory farm,
Definitely.
I think just because you might be sort of spending a lot on a Sunday roast joint of beef doesn't mean that the rest of the time you're not kind of actually contributing to the factory farming problem. Okay, this goes on to the next one. I only eat free range and organic, which is fine. The animals have a nice life.
Yes, it does follow on from the last question, because, so I know a farmer who regeneratively farms near Bury St Edmunds, and he's not vegan. They have the animals are part of the kind of ecosystem of the farm. It's an organic farm, and yes, they do kill the animals and eat them when they've sort of lived their end of their life. But I that is definitely not what's going on most of the time. Ultimately, I'm pro-choice. I don't think, as right back to the first question, we don't need to eat animals. So therefore, the kind of using animals for food is a really massively inefficient way of feeding anybody. So just for that reason alone, I don't think there's any justification for it, whether it's organic, hand reared or whatever, massaged every day of its life. You still can't deny the fact that to produce X grams of beef is so much more CO2 emissions than the same of tofu or peas or beans or something like that. So, you're going to have to kind of tackle those arguments at some point. You're not going to stop people from eating meat, but I hope that most people will massively reduce their consumption of meat. But I think, animal welfare, it's a hard one, isn't it? Because it's all behind closed doors, like you correctly alluded to. It's like 70% of the meat is in a factory farm, and you never really see what goes on there. So, and like you say, you make what you have on your lunch table on a Sunday lunch, but what you do the rest of the week, maybe you don't think about. But yeah, there is a case for eating some meat if it's reared properly, in a way which is totally in harmony with the soil and with the land and all of that. But I personally won't be doing it.
Yeah, they all end up at the slaughterhouse at the end of the day.
They certainly do. They all end up dead. Yes, you can't eat them until they're dead. So, yeah, I think people probably get away, kind of let themselves off the hook with that argument a lot. And I think provenance is a big theme in hospitality right now. So the provenance of your menu, where the animals are reared and all the rest of it. And I think it's a bit like greenwashing. It's the same kind of effect. You are effectively just letting your customers off the hook by that stuff.
Yeah. Okay, last question. I've given you a proper grilling. You've done really well. Fish is healthy.
Well, I believe fish is healthy, yeah, particularly raw fish. I believe that in terms of nutrition and sort of kindness to the body, it is pretty good, yeah. But there's a whole ton of reasons not to eat fish, though. And again, it's all to do with intensive farming, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you're going to go and sit by the lake and fish and catch your fish and take it home and do the whole thing on it, then that becomes about choice. But we're not living in that world, are we? We're like overfishing, like horrible toxins in the oceans, fish getting caught up in all kinds of cycles of disease, and it's not nice, basically.
it's shocking how much pollution the fishing industry causes as well. Because, you know, I think sort of going back sort of a few years, everyone was up in arms about, you know, the picture of a turtle with a straw kind of stuck up its nose or whatever. But actually, like, it's, you know, straws are a very small part in comparison to the amount of waste that the fishing industry causes. So, yeah, even though, like you say, fish, you know, can be healthy as part of a balanced diet, there are so many good alternatives, including seaweed. So, I don't know.
I love seaweed. I'm a big fan of seaweed. Yeah, definitely.
I love seaweed. Where do you get yours from? Do you kind of have the nori wraps or?
Yeah, just mostly dry. You can get all sorts of different dried seaweeds now. It's become quite commonplace now.
Yeah. Well, thank you ever so much. That was a bit of a quick fire round for you. But yeah, you're an activist as well as a founder of the restaurant, aren't you?
Well, it's funny, actually, this activist, the second conversation I had today about activism, somebody had asked me these questions and I sort of looked back because I never really thought of myself as an activist. But then I guess I'm an activist with delicious food. So I suppose I am an activist. It's just like people, when they think of the word activist, they think it's, you know, a little bit more aggressive than that, I suppose. But yeah, I suppose, I've always been banging a drum about veganism for 35 years now. So I suppose, that does make me an activist.
Yeah, well, I think food is the best form of activism, definitely. So
no, definitely.
Yeah, well, thank you for everything that you do. And I hope to see you at Stem and Glory one day in the future. Try those fish tacos.
Definitely. All right. Well, thanks very much for inviting me. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise.